Greetings, this is Brother Eli with another episode of Bible Truth Revealed. Today's topic is the abomination of ancestor worship. The abomination of ancestor worship. On the website slife.org, that's thespirituallife.org, there is an article entitled Ancestor Worship. This article is packed with information about ancestor worship around the world. It reveals that ancestor worship was and/or is practiced in places such as ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, West and Southeast African cultures such as Madagascar, Senegal, and Gambia, in East Asian cultures such as China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, in South and Southeast Asian cultures such as pre-colonial Burma or Myanmar, and Cambodia, on the Indian subcontinent, in Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Thailand, in some European cultures, and in North America. The practice of ancestor worship, also known as ancestor reverence or ancestor veneration, has been going on for thousands of years. However, the Most High repeatedly commanded the Israelites not to partake in this abomination. Many people argue that ancestor worship predates Christianity and that it was practiced by Israelites in Africa before we were conquered by the Christians and taken into slavery. Nevertheless, both ancestor worship and Christianity are pagan religions that are abominable in the sight of the Most High God. This is why ancestor worship fits so nicely with Christianity. It is all pagan idolatry. Israelites must repent from and avoid idolatry in all its forms, whether it is ancestor worship, Christianity, including Hebrew Israelite Christianity, or any other form of provoking the Most High to anger. Some people try to use the Bible to justify the despicable practice of ancestor worship. So today, I will use the Holy Scriptures to reveal what the Most High says about this sin. Let's hear the stark warning that the Most High issued to our forefathers before they entered the Promised Land. I will be reading from the Brenton Septuagint translation, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 to 14. That's Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 to 14. It reads thus: "There shall not be found in thee one who purges his son or his daughter with fire." That means no human sacrifice. One who uses divination, who deals with omens and augury. This is talking about using magic powers to foretell the future. Verse 11. A sorcerer employing incantation. This is casting magic spells. One who has in him a divining spirit. This is a psychic. An observer of signs, astrology, questioning the dead, ancestor worship. All these forbidden practices are part of what is called African traditional spirituality. The Most High does not want his holy people practicing these abominations. Verse 12. For everyone that does these things is an abomination to the Lord thy God. For because of these abominations, the Lord will destroy them from before thy face. Thou shalt be perfect before the Lord thy God. The holy chosen people of the Most High God are supposed to be perfect by keeping the commandments of the Lord thy God. And one of the commandments is that we must not question the dead. We are not supposed to be involved in African traditional spirituality. Verse 14. For all these nations whose land thou shalt inherit, they will listen to omens and divinations. Remember, the Israelites went to inherit the land of Canaan, which is in what is now called Africa. This means that African traditional spirituality was being practiced by the Canaanites when our forefathers inherited the promised land of Israel many thousands of years ago. But the Lord thy God has not permitted thee to do so. The Most High has not given permission to the Israelites to practice African traditional spirituality in general or ancestor worship in particular. In this article, Ancestor Worship, in slife.org, the first quote says this: Ancestor worship is a religious practice based on the belief that deceased family members have a continued existence, that the spirits of deceased ancestors will look after the family, take an interest in the affairs of the world, and possess the ability to influence the fortune of the living. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the word belief as something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion. Something believed. So we see that ancestor worship is based on opinions, not facts. Now, let's closely examine the rest of this quote and hold it up to the light of the Holy Scriptures to reveal its massive cracks. Ancestor worship is a religious practice based on the belief or opinion that one, deceased family members have a continued existence. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 5 to 6. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 5 to 6 reads thus: For the living will know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no continued existence. They know nothing. And there is no longer any reward to them. So leave them alone. For their memory is lost. They don't remember a thing. Also their love, that's lost. And their hatred, that's lost. And their envy have now perished. Perished means lost. They're gone. They do not remember anything. They love nothing. They hate nothing. They envy nothing. All has perished. Yet there is no portion for them anymore forever in all that is done under the sun. They're gone. They have no continued existence. Leave them alone. Number 2, that the spirits of deceased ancestors will look after the family. After a funeral, some people leave lights burning all night so that the spirit of the dead could find his or her way home. Let's turn to Job chapter 7, verses 9 to 10. Job chapter 7, verses 9 to 10 reads thus: I am as a cloud that is cleared away from the sky. For if a man go down to the grave, he shall not come up again. He stays down there. Verse 10, and he shall surely not return to his own house, neither shall his place know him any more. So these people who are leaving lights burning all night so the spirit of the dead could find his or her way home, they are simply wasting their time. And the interesting thing is, sometimes evil spirits go to these people's homes on that very night because they know that they will be welcome on that night, because these people will think that this is the deceased person returning home. It's a dangerous practice. The third part of the quote says that the spirits of deceased ancestors take an interest in the affairs of the world. In other words, that their dead relatives are still watching and thinking about what's happening in the lives of those who are still living. Psalm 145 in the Brenton Septuagint translation is Psalm 146 in the KJV. I will read Psalm 145 verses 3 to 4. That's Psalm 145 verses 3 to 4. And it reads thus: Trust not in princes, nor in the children of men, in whom there is no safety. Your dead relatives cannot protect you. They couldn't protect you when they were alive. What makes you think they can protect you now that they are dead? Now that they know nothing. Verse 4. His breath shall go forth, and he shall return to his earth. In that day, all his thoughts shall perish. If his thoughts have perished, this means that he is not taking an interest in the affairs of the world. He is not watching and thinking about what is happening in the lives of those who are still living. The dead know nothing. They are at rest. Number 4, that the spirits of deceased ancestors possess the ability to influence the fortune of the living. Because idolaters think that their ancestors can bring them good fortune, they go to question or seek the advice of these ancestors. They usually do this by going to a witch doctor, a voodoo priest, or any other enemy of the Most High. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 19. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 19 says this: And if they should say to you, seek those who have in them a divining spirit, and them that speak out of the earth, them that speak vain words, who speak out of their belly, shall not a nation diligently seek to their God? Why are we being told to go and seek witch doctors and voodoo priests, those people who have these divining spirits in them? Why are we told to go and seek after psychics in African traditional spirituality when they only speak vain words? Their words are pointless. We are not supposed to listen to them. Shall not a nation diligently seek to their God? Are we not supposed to seek the Most High only? It continues. Why do they seek to the dead concerning the living? It is vain to seek to the dead concerning the living. The dead do not have the ability to influence the fortune of the living. So it is vanity. It is a waste of time to go and seek the dead concerning the living. We are supposed to seek the Most High only. Quote number 2 in slife.org, is under the subheading Overview. It says, ancestor reverence is not the same as the worship of a deity or deities. So many people say we don't worship the ancestors, we just give reverence to the ancestors. In some Afro-diasporic cultures, ancestors are seen as being able to intercede on behalf of the living, often as messengers between humans and the gods. As spirits who were once human themselves, they are seen as being better able to understand human needs than would a divine being. So the argument here is that the Most High cannot understand human needs. He doesn't understand the people that He's created. So we have to have these ancestors who were once human, who are now closer to being divine, to go and intercede on our behalf, to explain to the Most High what it's like to be a human being. The Holy Scriptures say nothing of the sort. The Most High never instructed His people to come to Him through our ancestors. Just like He never told us to come to Him through the false god and idol of Christianity. We are not pagans, so we must not do as the pagans do. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31 reads thus: Ye shall not attend to those who have in them divining spirits. This means do not go to a witch doctor. Do not go to a voodoo priest. Do not go to a psychic. No, attach yourselves to enchanters, those people that cast magic spells, to pollute yourselves with them. When we go to these abominable people who do abominable things, we make ourselves abominable. We pollute ourselves. We are a holy people. We are supposed to be separate. We are supposed to remain clean, not polluted. And it continues, I am the Lord your God. Why is it necessary for the Most High to make that statement that He is the Lord our God? Because He's reminding us that we must come to Him. We must seek Him only and not seek those who have in them divining spirits, to pollute ourselves with them. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 6. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 6 reads thus: And the soul that shall follow those who have in them divining spirits or enchanters, so as to go a-whoring after them. When we go after the voodoo priest, the witch doctor, the psychic, and these are the enemies of the Most High God, we are going a-whoring. We are polluting ourselves. We're making ourselves a filthy people instead of a holy people. It continues, I will set my face against that soul. If you want the Most High to set His face against you, one of the best ways to do that is to go a-whoring after these evil witch doctors and voodoo priests and psychics in African traditional spirituality or any other type of abominable religious practice. It continues, and will destroy it from among its people. The Most High is going to destroy those who practice ancestor worship, who practice African traditional spirituality, who practice Christianity and all these pagan abominations, instead of coming directly to him like he's commanded his people to do. Shortly, we will consider an example of an Israelite that disobeyed the Most High by seeking answers from the dead. We will learn that those who consult witch doctors or voodoo priests or psychics or even their Christian pastor in order to communicate with the ancestors are setting themselves up for destruction. This is not to say that it is impossible to communicate with the dead. It is certainly possible. But because something is possible does not mean that it is permissible. The Most High has forbidden his people from communicating with the dead. We are to seek him only. This is why Isaiah chapter 8 verse 19 says, "Shall not a nation diligently seek to their God? Why do they seek to the dead concerning the living?" Now let's see what happens when Israelites communicate with the dead. 1 Kings chapter 28 in the Brenton Septuagint translation is 1 Samuel chapter 28 in the KJV. I'll be reading 1 Kings chapter 28 verses 3 to 20 in the Brenton Septuagint translation. That's 1 Kings chapter 28 verses 3 to 20, and it reads thus. "And Samuel died." So that's the dead. That's the ancestor right there. "And all Israel lamented for him, and they buried him in his city in Amathaim. And Saul had removed those who had in them divining spirits. So all of the voodoo priests, the witch doctors, the psychics had been kicked out of the land, had been put to death, and the wizards out of the land." Why? Because Saul knew that the practice of communicating with the dead was abominable, and it provoked and displeased the Most High. So he removed those people from the land. Verse 4. "And the Philistines assemble themselves and come and encamp in Sonem, and Saul gathers all the men of Israel, and they encamp in Gelbu. And Saul saw the camp of the Philistines." He saw that there were lots of people on the enemy's side, and he was alarmed. He was shocked, and his heart was greatly dismayed. He was discouraged because the Philistines had more people than the Israelites to wage this war. Verse 6. "And Saul inquired of the Lord. So he prayed to the Most High, and the Lord answered him not by dreams, nor by manifestations, nor by prophets." So the Most High refused to answer Saul. Many people turn to ancestor worship because the Most High does not answer their prayers. Instead of finding out why their prayers are not being answered, they become frustrated, turn their back on the Most High, and find the closest witch doctor, or voodoo priest, or pastor, or psychic to consult the ancestors. This is folly and will lead to their destruction. To learn how to get your prayers answered, please listen to my teaching entitled "How to Pray According to the Scriptures." How to pray according to the Scriptures. When we pray according to the Scriptures, the Most High hears our prayers and he answers our prayers. But Saul was in the midst of sin. He was rebellious against the Most High, and that's why the Most High refused to answer his prayers. Those people who practice African traditional spirituality are in rebellion those people who practice Christianity are rebelling against the Most High, and this is why he does not answer their prayers. Verse 7. Then Saul said to his servants, "Seek for me a woman who has in her a divining spirit." So this woman has in her a divining spirit. "And I will go to her and inquire of her." And his servant said to him, "Behold, there is a woman who has in her a divining spirit at Endor." Saul sought a woman who had in her a divining spirit. This means that she had a demonic spirit in her. She was possessed by a demonic spirit which gave her the power to communicate with the dead. Possession is a common occurrence among those who practice ancestor worship. It is demonic spirits that possess people and enable them to communicate with the ancestors. These pagans try to justify this sin by comparing it to Christians being possessed by the Holy Ghost. However, as Christianity is also a pagan abomination, the fact that Christians are also possessed cannot be used to justify this sin. For a better understanding of this issue, please listen to my teaching entitled, "The Spirit of Christ is Demonic." That is, the Spirit of Christ is demonic. Verse 8. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment, and he goes and 2 men with him, and they come to the woman by night. So he put on a disguise, he changed his clothes to clothes that were not royal, not kingly. He took these other men and they went by night under the cover of darkness because he knew that what he was doing was wrong. There are many people who practice ancestor worship and they know that what they're doing is wrong, but they continue to do it in secret. But the Most High sees what you do. It continues. And he said to her, "Divine to me, I pray thee, by the divining spirit within thee." In other words, the spirit that is possessing you, by that spirit, and bring up to me him whom I shall name to thee. Notice that Saul had no doubt that this woman, by the demon that was inside her, would be able to bring back the dead. Verse 9. And the woman said to him, "Behold now, thou knowest what Saul has done," because she doesn't recognize that he is Saul. He's wearing a disguise. "How he has cut off those who had in them divining spirits, and the wizards from the land. And why dost thou spread a snare for my life to destroy it? So why are you asking me to do this thing, knowing that if Saul finds out, he will kill me?" Verse 10. And Saul swore to her and said, "As the Lord lives, no injury shall come upon thee on this account." And the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up to thee?" And again, notice, the woman has no doubt that she's able to bring up the dead because she knows that the demon that's inside her has the power to do so. And he said, "Bring up to me Samuel." The same Samuel that died at the beginning of this chapter. That's the ancestor that Saul wants bringing up so he can inquire of him. Verse 12. And the woman saw Samuel and cried out with a loud voice. This woman is shocked. Why? Because although she called for Samuel, she didn't expect it to be this particular Samuel, Samuel the prophet. Who in their right mind would call up Samuel the prophet from the dead? And the woman said to Saul, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. So she recognizes now that this is Saul, because Saul is the only person who would want to consult with Samuel, because Samuel was the prophet that guided Saul while Samuel was yet alive. So it's all coming together now. Verse 13. And the king said to her, Fear not, tell me whom thou hast seen. And the woman said to him, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said to her, What didst thou perceive? He wants details. And she said to him, An upright man ascending out of the earth, and he was clothed with a mantle. And Saul knew that this was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the earth and did obeisance to him. So the ancestor Samuel appeared to Saul. This Samuel was called up by this woman who had in her a divining spirit, a demonic spirit, because demons do have the power to disturb the sleep of the dead. When we disturb the ancestors, when we call them up from their sleep, we are going against a direct command by the Most High God. That is sin, no matter how you look at it. Verse 15. And Samuel said, Why hast thou troubled me? In other words, why hast thou disturbed me? Samuel is finally in a state of rest, and Saul has come to trouble him, to disturb him. We're not supposed to trouble the ancestors. Let them rest. Again, and Samuel said, Why hast thou troubled me that I should come up? And Saul said, I am greatly distressed, and the Philistines war against me. So now he's telling him all of his problems. And God has departed from me, and no longer hearkens to me, either by the hand of prophets or by dreams. And now I have called thee to tell me what I shall do. Those people who practice ancestor worship, they call on the ancestors to tell them what they should do. This is the same thing that Saul was doing. It is an abominable practice. You are troubling the ancestors when they should be resting. Verse 16. And Samuel said, Why askest thou me, whereas the Lord has departed from thee? We're not supposed to be asking the ancestors questions. The only reason people go to the ancestors is because the Most High has departed from them. The Most High is not answering their prayers. We're not supposed to disturb or trouble the ancestors. We are supposed to find out why the Most High is not answering us so that we can repent and start getting answers from the Most High Himself. Not by circumventing and going to the dead, going to the ancestors as though the ancestors can go to the Most High on our behalf. It does not work that way. It continues, and taken part with thy neighbor. So now the Most High has joined himself to David, and he's forgotten about Saul. And the Lord has done to thee as the Lord spoke by me. And the Lord will rend thy kingdom out of thy hand, and will give it to thy neighbor David. So David will be the king after Saul. Because thou didst not hearken to the voice of the Lord. When we don't listen to the voice of the Most High God, He leaves us. He takes away the things that He gave us. He stops answering our prayers, and does not execute His fierce anger upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to thee this day. And the Lord shall deliver Israel with thee into the hands of the Philistines. And tomorrow thou and thy sons with thee shall fall, and the Lord shall deliver the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. So he has inquired of the dead, he got his answer, but the answer is his destruction. And Saul instantly fell at his full length upon the earth. He fainted and was greatly afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no longer any strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all that day and all that night. Some Christians insist that it was not Samuel the prophet who answered King Saul. They say that it was a demon. However, we see in verse 11 that King Saul said, "Bring up to me Samuel." In verse 12, we learn that the woman saw Samuel, and verse 14 says, Saul knew that this was Samuel. Despite that, there are certain Christian cults that teach that it was impossible for this to be Samuel, so it must have been a demon. Those of us who actually believe the Holy Scriptures know for a fact that it was Samuel who appeared to King Saul. Let's consider another witness of this fact. 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verse 13. 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verse 13 reads thus. So Saul died for his transgressions, wherein he transgressed against God, against the word of the Lord, for as much as he kept it not, because Saul inquired of a wizard to seek counsel, and Samuel the prophet answered him. Samuel the prophet answered him. It does not say that a demon answered him, as some Christian cults would have us believe. It says Samuel the prophet answered him, which proves that it is indeed possible to communicate with the dead. But because it is possible does not mean that it is permissible. We are not supposed to communicate with the dead. We are supposed to let them rest. And we are supposed to seek our answers from the Most High and Him only. Quote number 3 in slife.org under the subheading West and Southeast African Cultures says this: Ancestor veneration is prevalent throughout Africa and serves as the basis of many religions. It is often augmented by a belief in a supreme being. So many times the people that practice ancestor worship, they are fully aware of the supreme being, which is the Most High God. But prayers and or sacrifices are usually offered to the ancestors. So they pray to the ancestors. They offer sacrifices to the ancestors who may ascend to becoming a kind of minor deities themselves. Minor deities, small gods. As these pagans like to say, the ancestors are gods with a little g. Some people who practice ancestor worship claim that they are not committing idolatry because they recognize that the Most High is the one true God. They say that the ancestors are gods with a little g, so it's okay to venerate them. It's okay to reverence them. But this is having other gods beside or in addition to the Most High. This is no better than worshiping the false god and idol of Christianity while acknowledging the Most High God. This is why African traditional spirituality is just as abominable as Christianity. They are both pagan, idolatrous religions that provoke the Most High to anger. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3 reads thus: Thou shalt have no other gods beside me. If the ancestors are gods, we're not supposed to have them beside the Most High God. It is not enough to acknowledge the Most High God, then go on to worship or reverence or venerate the ancestors. We are breaking the commandment when we have other gods or minor deities or gods with little g's beside or in addition to the Most High God. Exodus chapter 22, verse 19. Exodus chapter 22, verse 19 says, He that sacrifices to any gods but to the Lord alone shall be destroyed by death. This is how we know that those people that sacrifice to the ancestors will be destroyed. In conclusion, ancestor worship is not a new phenomenon. It has been practiced for thousands of years in different countries across the world. However, the Most High warned his chosen people not to partake in this abominable practice. Some people have even invited demonic spirits into their homes and their lives, thinking that they are their ancestors. This is one of the ways that those who disobey the Most High will ultimately be destroyed. Instead of looking for answers and protection from the dead, we must seek the Most High only, because the dead cannot help the living. And with that, I say, Shalom.